proud or make my whole lineage proud or something like that. But I really didn't have very clear idea of how I'm going to do that, what I want to do. But yeah, I was fairly certain that I want to do things that impact and I can serve, but in my own way. I want to do my own thing and serve in my own way. So we started, this whole conflict about not being able to pursue sports and not being able to make. So I was fairly certain I won't be able to make a living out of it, and I would have to fairly certainly look at a second career. If not now, I'll probably have a sporting career of a year or two. That's all I would have in India. So that was not something that I thought was a long-term thing to do. So then I thought I need to educate myself, and I decided to follow, the more conventional path, formal education. So I prepared for the civil services, but then I got very disenchanted with that, even though I qualified the exams. And I went to told my dad, the IES, the bureaucracy. So all my teachers said, you must, academically, you're bright, so you should go and do this. And I did it, and I was very disenchanted because I don't think bureaucracy really, because of the tentacles and the red tapeism, and I'm talking nearly 25 years back, I wasn't very enthused with how I can be of value in bureaucracy. I actually thought it's very stifling, and I wanted to feel more free. So even after qualifying for the mains, and just a few days before the interview, I decided to drop out of civil services, and I had actually invested 2 years of my life doing that. And then I said, okay, what I want to do is I want to be in a commercial capital of the country, so that I'm able to bring business to good use. Is there a way? Because in my head, I felt that, new ideas, innovative new ideas that have a monetization model, in my head, by the time I had that clarity that, they can create a huge difference, because you can solve a problem, you can also generate new sources of revenue, and, you can scale businesses, you can probably have a global stage. So I had not clear ideas, very, very uncrystallized, amorphous sort of a thinking in my head. And after doing my graduation in Delhi University, I actually shifted to Mumbai to pursue my MBA. So at the time, my college was in the top 5 business schools. So my parents were saying, okay, fine, it's a good college, you can take that risk. Otherwise, typically, shifting from I had this comfort zone, and shifting to a Mumbai is a tough life, and, pursue an MBA, and, that's a different trajectory. But they were okay, because they felt, okay, it's an academically good decision to make. So I moved to Mumbai, and ever since then, I've actually been here. I finished that, and the time that we did our MBA, that was also one of those very early days of doing MBA to use creativity into solving business problems. So that's really what the course prepared you for. And then eventually the first job that I took was a media AOR job. That again was never done before. Like that was a very early days. We used to work out of a mezzanine floor, and that in South Mumbai, my first office. So I used to take the public transport. So first I would take that auto rickshaw, because you in Mumbai, you can't afford to live in a South Mumbai or closer to your workplaces. So we had to live in places called suburbs. And those suburbs, so the commute is, just to get your work, is about 2 hours one way. And for that, you'll have to change 3 different public transports. Like you'll get into an auto, then you'll take a bus, public transport, and then you'll get onto a train, and then get to your office. And so that was my journey. So I started off, my first job was this. And when you get to office, because it was like a startup, really new age idea, we had to work from mezzanine floor. So, it was like, the mezzanine floor is not even a floor. When you get onto a floor, it's somewhere in between. So you can't even stand up. You have to just be cowered down. And there used to be rats around, because, that's the way it was. It was South Mumbai, and, maintenance of those old buildings was not. But, the team I worked with were fabulous, and we were trying to create media AOR. At the time, we were working with P&G, really, really big brands, P&G, Coke, and our company was doing fabulous work. So that's really how I started. That was my first job, from the mezzanine floor. And so from that point on, I actually ended up picking up ideas or companies which are very, very nascent. I don't know whether I found them or they found me. So I kept on moving into a direction where I could be, my sphere of influence could improve. Meaning, if I wasn't very content in doing, like a backroom job. So what I wanted to do was, once a startup got established and it was in steady state, I wanted to move on and do another thing and pick up another project which would challenge me, and I could, create a whole ecosystem around. So I took calls very early on in my career that most people don't do. They would look for that. I was told I have a very high risk appetite, and I didn't even know. Is that so? I mean, I didn't even know that I had a risk appetite. That was the most natural thing. So to answer your question, in my head, there was no method. It was just instinctively I felt that, in this assignment, I can add a lot of value, and the value only I decided. In my head, I had some strange, sketchy math saying, okay, now with this, I think I can bring my talents to work, I can learn, and I can add a lot of value to the ecosystem. So it's only been that. It's been extremely instinctive. I really didn't look at what title people were offering me in the corporate ladder. I really didn't have, like a sequential ladder up process in my corporate career as well. I just looked at whether I got really excited with the job, and I was, and how many people told me not to do it. So those were my
a lot, right? Like how many
Yeah.
people actually told you for years that you couldn't do what you're doing?
You can't do this. Don't do this. You can't do this. Nobody does this, and this is too risky. And what have you got? What would you get in return? What is in it for you? So those are the questions, and I don't know. Somehow I just didn't have that math around that part in my head ever. What is in it for me? I never looked at it like that, because I just wanted to go out there and just do the things I instinctively felt were good for the industry, or where I felt I could revive a business. I was very excited if I could create business from scratch. So that gave me a lot of, I think, pleasure. And also, I think and in retrospect, when I look back now after 25 years of trying to work with startups and in different domains, doing really risky sort of assignments, for example, Getty Images, this company Getty Images is the world's largest digital imagery company. And at the time they were a listed company. But they were really struggling of how to find a foothold in India, and they were not finding anybody who would take up that assignment. So assignments like that, they were assignments nobody was willing to touch because it will jeopardize their careers. So, and I thought, wow, imagine if you can have a digital imagery platform. Imagine the service it is to the creative professionals. Imagine if it can be available to them in India. Because see, what were people doing? Otherwise, creative professionals are pirating those images. It was a huge problem in India. 80% of the images used are pirated. So nobody's willing. So, the creative professional doesn't get paid. The photographer doesn't get paid. So fundamentally, it's an unfair system that was. So for me, my reason was doing Getty Images is because I thought, wow, they're structuring a totally unstructured industry. They are offering value to the creative professionals, at the same time offering value and copyright to the producer. Because, in a digital bank company, the producer doesn't get any value. Like most of the creative content, the creator doesn't get anything because piracy steals away their sort of margins. At the end of the day, sometimes they don't even have the copyright. They don't even get credit in perpetuity about what they're doing. So I thought it was a fundamentally unfair system, and if I can play some role in putting things together and creating a sort of market for something like that in India. So those were my lens to sort of take up an assignment, take up a project, set it up. It was really, there's no conventional logic for anything that I've done. None of my assignments, and most of the assignments I took up were like really gone. Like they were either sinking businesses or too early in the day, and somehow, but I'm so grateful that somehow like the timing has been so wonderful that if I've actually taken up something, I could scale it and I could show the success in the business every and single time. So that gave me a lot of confidence about what I was saying. And after some time, I stopped listening to people who were telling me this can't be done. I just stopped listening to them. And it doesn't get easy. Actually, the more you succeed, it actually gets more difficult. Like they say, new level, new devil. It's never easy. It's not going to be easy. So people who say, okay, I proved, I've demonstrated to you that, this can be done. But you see, you have to demonstrate every single time. Uh, it's not just once. So you have to prepare. I think I keep thinking that you have to have those resources within you to continue to, you can't be happy that, hey, listen, I was validated. I had a business proposition. Now I'm validated. Hey, I've arrived. Because no matter what you do, you'll always be challenged. So, it's all right to anticipate that. So now it can be sometimes very disheartening. So when I took up SLSV, like the company that I founded 2014, nobody in India was talking triple bottom line. I mean, it's not even a word in India, like triple bottom line or people, planet, profit, consciousness. It's not even an idea. Nobody has a time for it in India. When I started evangelizing and when I set up my platform, when I set up a company, because we wanted to kind of evangelize this concept, and we wanted to speak to corporates to adopt a more kinder, more inclusive, more diverse approach to doing business. And I was just one voice. Even today, triple bottom line, very few people, hardly anybody has a business around it where they're consulting or evangelizing in India. Probably, maybe I'm one of the very few. And we are just not talking CSR. We're also talking how you can create purposeful businesses. And I know these ideas are very understood in the US and other developed countries, but they're not so well understood, or they're not a way of doing business in India. And when I was doing all that, it wasn't that I had a reference point in the US or a reference point in any other market. I just felt that while being in that, I felt, hey, there's a better way of doing it. Because I was working with startups, I was able to scale those startups. They started making revenue while we were scaling up at that breakneck pace. They actually forgot what they stood for. Most of the startups just lost their way. It's like being a star, So you become a star, and then you actually forget what got you there in the first place. So you got there to actually serve. People forget that, once the businesses scale in India and you start making a lot of money, then it becomes a different kind of challenge, where they want to see how they can do, they can disproportionately corner the success, disproportionately take the credit. And people who actually worked at it, they get sidelined, they get marginalized and the who. So when a startup becomes a success, there are other factors that take the life over. Like when a startup becomes a corporate, it becomes hugely politicized. It forgets its essence, what it started out, what it meant out to do, the real thing that it went out for. And any category, I'm just not talking like in a particular industry, any industry. I saw that happening. And I said, hey, this can't be a way of living. This is not sustainable. Somebody's got to talk about how being sustainable or long-term is great business sense. Because see, so you do cash and burn approach, and you become this scalable, profitable. You're not profitable, okay, you are a unicorn, so to say, or you have a very high valuation, but essentially you are not profitable, your books are not clean, you're not transparent in your operations, you've not paid attention to your team, your other stakeholders, the ESG, so to say. You have completely degraded the environment while you were doing that. So what's the point of all this? Because anyway, it comes back to bite you. So I've seen these stories were really short-lived. So they were like blitzkrieg for about 5 to 6 years, and they made people terribly unhappy. The people who were working for those companies were so unhappy that eventually, of course, it will reflect on your customers. So if your people who work and who are creating those businesses, if they are so unhappy, it will eventually sort of have a bearing on everything around you, and it will eventually affect your top lines and bottom line. So I saw that I